Common frogs are one of those creatures that are found in more places than people realise, and they're really well adapted to being on land as well as in water. Ponds are the obvious place where people come across them, but they can actually turn up in grasslands and under hedges and places that people don't often realise in their back gardens. And they're really well adapted to both dry land and water. There are 7 different native amphibians, the toads and newts being the other 2 groups that you come across. And the colouring and markings of frogs is really amazing as well. They can actually change colour, and their green and black blotches can sometimes be brown and darker colours to mimic their surroundings. And the tadpoles are really amazing too, because they're not only a dark colour, they have lovely golden spots on them. You can actually find them in different places, and they're often around you more often than you think. So if you have a little patch of garden with a hedge or even some plant pots in a damper corner, they can live under the plant pots, hiding away, looking for worms and flies and bugs. They are really good at controlling those bugs that you find in your garden, so they're a real sort of asset for the gardener. And obviously they are strongly associated with water, so if you do have a little garden pond or even a wet splash in the corner of the garden that's damper than anywhere else, you may find them hiding away there. And if there is a pond, that's where they will head for breeding and laying the frog spawn and those turning into the tadpoles. They are often seen hopping around, so that's where you're likely to find them, when they're hopping up and down through the grass. So like most species with the name common, they're actually unfortunately not as common as they used to be. Frogs and a lot of our amphibians have disappeared from the countryside and parks and gardens, largely because we've become too tidy and tidying up those places that they would live, in the hedge bottom and at the bottom of the garden under a wood pile or rocks and stones. And in the wider countryside, it's the loss of our wetland habitats that's been the biggest problem. We've actually lost so many of our ponds since the Second World War, where we actually then drained a lot of wetlands and intensified the landscape. Around 70% of our amphibians have declined drastically over that period, the 50-year period that we've just encountered. And that's really the main reason why frogs need our help. So if someone wants to help common frogs in their garden, the easiest and best way is to dig a pond. And even a tiny little pond in the corner of the garden that holds water for most of the year is a massive asset for frogs. And not only for frogs, other species will benefit too. Your garden birds, insects, the wildflowers that grow around the edge of the pond, all brilliant for wildlife. If you haven't got space for a pond or can't put a pond in, then actually just having a little area of the garden where you maybe leave a few logs or a pile of stones, or you have a pile of old plant pots that you don't need, particularly the terracotta ones, the clay plant pots. If you put them in the corner of the garden, they will actually be a place for frogs to hide away. And if we can all do a little bit, we can connect up our gardens and frogs can then move around in the local area. So the Wildlife Trust have been working for a long time restoring wetlands, digging ponds and creating new habitats for species and wildlife. And a recent project was the Wolds Dew Ponds project. The Yorkshire Wolds in East Yorkshire is a fairly dry landscape with very little water. And these man-made ponds had gone into disrepair because they weren't needed anymore. And we've been working with farmers on the Wolds to recreate a network of these ponds. So we've got a joined up, connected landscape in amongst the grassland valleys, so that the ponds are places where the frogs can migrate to and then use the grasslands to hide away in when they don't need the pond. The aim ultimately is to have a huge network of these ponds restored across the landscape, both up in the Wolds and down into the lowlands. And if we can do that, not only will the frogs benefit, but we'll have benefits for birds, for insects, for wildflowers, and that can only be good for us as well, for our well-being and enjoyment of the great outdoors.